Hey, GLP-1 plus size community. Before we jump into the podcast, please take the time to leave us a 5-star review on whatever audio platform you're listening to the podcast on. Share your story and how the podcast has helped you. This will help us get referred up in the audio platform so that we can reach more people that need our help, our support, and guidance from our doctors. Help us get loud and change things. Are you interested in understanding GLP-1 medications like Ozempic, wegovy, or Mounjaro? Then join us on the Plus Sides Cracking the Obesity Code, the groundbreaking podcast helping people change their lives one episode at a time. The Plus Sides podcast is a disruptor. We're breaking down barriers, smashing stereotypes, and sharing inspiring stories that'll leave you feeling informed and empowered. Join us every week to learn from doctors who are specialists around GLP-1 medications like Ozempic, wegovy, and Mounjaro. They'll provide you with science and facts to validate these incredible stories. But that's not all. We'll also bring you the voices of the GLP-1 Mounjaro TikTok community, real people who face the challenges of obesity-related diseases and disorders and discovered the incredible plus sides of GLP-1 medications. Our episodes are filled with heartwarming stories, laughter, and moments of triumph. You'll connect with our amazing community members who are reclaiming their health and experiencing their fullest lives. Are you ready to embark on a journey of discovery and empowerment? Tune in to the Plus Sides Cracking the Obesity Code, and together we'll change the narrative around obesity and end the stigma. Subscribe now on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform and join our incredible community. Let's celebrate the plus sides of life together, because every story deserves to be heard. Every life deserves to shine, and everyone deserves access to expert knowledge and medication. The Plus Sides Podcast. You're not alone. It's not your fault.
"20 seconds a week to lose 20% of your weight in a year with diet and exercise." That's the power of GLP-1s through Ro. Ro helps find the medication that's right for you, based on cost, availability, and your weight loss goals. Losing weight with GLP-1s is possible through Ro.
Right. And I think people also refuse to acknowledge that we might not look the package, but yet we're very healthy. And so, I always think about this cat with you. I'm like, oh my God, you're exercising, you're doing all the things. It's great. And it's so interesting that I had a triggering moment, talk about before and afters. There's this physician that I follow. And I never released the video. There's always stuff you don't release. And this person was talking about using GLP-1. They had like a popping 6-pack at that point. And my video had wanted to be on, look, you probably were already pretty darn fit if you lost 30 pounds and had popping out 6-pack, but I don't want to belittle their results, right? So I ultimately never released it. But the point of the video was, for me, is like, that will never be visible unless I have bariatric and extensive surgery or this or that. You won't see those, 50, 60, 70, 80 pounds. It's like it never, people will never realize that happened. It doesn't mean, though, that you're not more healthy, that you're not doing all the things. So some of us will never look the package. And I agree with you, like with the fat liberation thing, part of it's coming to acceptance of like, this is what's possible for my body. And there's a real power in that.
I think it could be a hybrid. You could have a hybrid of like, the fat empowerment and with this.
That's where I've always stood, but it's not.
We live in both worlds. Yeah.
It's not in the middle to say, hey, everybody actually has a valid point here. Everybody is actually right to some extent.
Yeah. And we all know that's a really hard place to get to, right?
Yeah, it is.
Oh my gosh.
Because of how we were treated being obese.
Yeah.
We still beat ourselves up. I know I do.
Right.
Like,
so I don't begrudge.
Yeah.
I don't begrudge anybody that I talk to that needs to lose that 20 pounds.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's
because
all
it's 100% understandable.
Yeah. But I did in the beginning. That's my thing, is like in the beginning when people were like, I just can't get off this 20. I just can't get off this 20. And I think about food all the time. And I did. I was like, no, this is for obesity and diabetes. Like but now I'm like, look, like it's a lot. These medicines have to do with health. So if you and your doctor have decided that this will help you with whatever off label, I don't give a shit. Like, I really like, if you guys have decided that together, then that's up to you. And like, I'm just trying to get in like a more of a place of just like acceptance, like, and understanding that, like, now I always do worry, like when people are like, I just want to lose this 20 pounds, right? I know that 20 pounds, like everything's relative. Like with my mom, 20 pounds is a ton of weight to my mom, right? 20 pounds to me is the same 20 pounds I've lost and regained over my entire life. And it's not even a size difference, because You know what I'm saying? Because I'm very tall and proportioned,
Yeah.
right? So I'm trying to remember it's relative, right? So her 20 maybe more like my 60, right? And that's a big deal. And that's something like when we saw that Jillian Michaels interview that she did on News Nation, where she was like, okay, so fine, whatever, you take it and you lose 45 pounds, big deal, you're still obese. Like, I mean, she didn't say that, but that's what she said. And I was like, 45 pounds is life-changing for people. You know what I mean? So like I was very dismissive, and I feel like that's a very common thing, especially like in media and in the trolls and the comments and stuff, that people say those things, you know. But I do want to get back to Dr. Rentea. So Jeannie and I was talking a lot about, she's done a lot of like trying to figure out what was wrong with her. Like that was her, she was saying in the beginning, right? This is a problem. Something's wrong. I want to find out what it is, and then just trying to educate as much as possible herself to learn these different things. And I would love, because you and I got to be on a podcast together, not your podcast, we got to do that too. That's posted, guys. But we got to be on one together of someone that sort of educates and trains fitness trainers, right?
Oh, I was on that one too.
Yeah, I was on
You did.
I forgot. Yeah.
Memory.
Love me through it. Love me through it.
Menopause. It's menopause brain. So yeah.
No, this is just Kim, huh?
It's my perimenopause brain. I forgot.
You were there too. And we wanted to have a discussion around that, like around fitness and all the things. But you read a definition of obesity that I feel like everyone needs to hear, and where it's from, so people can understand that it is complex, because it is not about just weight. So can you like go into that for us?
Okay, so I'm so glad that we're talking about this. So this is the OMA, the Obesity Medicine Association. I think they do really great work. And here is the official definition. I'm going to read it because I don't have it memorized.
Yeah.
So they describe it as a chronic, progressive, relapsing, treatable, multifactorial neurobehavioral disease wherein there's an increase in body fat that promotes adipose tissue dysfunction and abnormal fat mass physical forces, resulting in adverse metabolic, biochemical, psychosocial health consequences. And so I'm going to just sum this up, right? Multiple areas are affected. There is no system in our body that is not affected by the hormonal, neurobehavioral, all the things within our body, brain, gut, hormones, everything. People think of adipose, meaning fat tissue, as just being this like aesthetic thing that's inert, meaning it doesn't do anything. No, it's highly metabolically active. And then it impacts so many different areas of life. So yes, we get I think I like to focus a lot on the sort of the like health side, like blood sugar, things like that. But there's also the arthritis side that's happening early. There's you're going to get stigmatized more. You're not going to be as high income earning. You're going to need knee replacements earlier. Like there's just depression's higher, anxiety, all those kind of things. So it's like, it's so diverse. So when insurance companies, I'm sorry, I'm going there, when they want to say it's aesthetic, I think, oh my gosh, this could be the furthest thing from it, but they're just not understanding kind of how complex it really is and why there's a whole field just dedicated to this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if it's that they don't understand or don't care. Because I do feel like, and I say this a lot, like, y'all know I tend to grandstand sometimes, but ultimately, it's just because I'm passionate, but ultimately, like, insurance companies, they think that you're going to, and we've talked about this on one of our episodes before, what you're going to be within 3 to 5 years, maybe. So what they do is they continue to kick the can down the road, right? The problem is all of them have been doing this. And now we're everybody's problem, because we either have right? Hello. So stuff's got to change, because frankly, with the way things are going, and that's something, you know, when we talked about on your show too, about, you know, the hearing that they had with Novo, the one thing that I thought was, or with the CEO of Novo Nordisk, one thing I thought was really interesting is honestly the opening statement. The way that I felt like Bernie said it, and not just Bernie, this is bipartisan, I'm not getting into politics, bipartisan, right? Way that he said it was basically all those things in that definition that you just described. And this is going to bankrupt our country if we don't address it. Like, because it's only just now starting to get better, you know? And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that change on our podcast, about how we're seeing a change in obesity and kind of what your take is on it, and maybe what your peers are thinking.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've always been seeing the trends going up and up, right? The rates of either overweight or obesity. So it's purely a BMI cutoff, but the point is it's been trended, right? It's always up, 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 up. And only now are we seeing that trend start to go down. And the only appreciable, meaningful difference that has happened in the past few years here is that so many more Americans are on a GLP-1. It's quoted to be 1 out of every 8 right now are on it. And so that's higher than the level that you would predict for just metabolic reasons. You know what I mean? Like just if it was pre-diabetes or diabetes, things like that. And so that's the only reason that one of the reasons, obviously it helps unlock other things that people are able to do. But so that's significant if we can turn the tide on that.
Yeah. And you know what I think is interesting is those many, many years, like back to what Jeannie was talking about with specifically with like all the diets and all the things that she's tried, it was the worst. Like we're here in the thick of diet culture over the past 60 years, Weight Watchers, right? And all these things that are happening, right? I just feel like that kid on
that are proven to fail.
right?
Like,
That
it's
have been
about
nothing but,
manifest.
and it's the worst. It just kept going up. So hello, like, I mean, I just feel like if we're looking at just data, you know, it shows it.
Well, that's where we hit back to the ethics of it. It's because, you know, the narrative was it's a public health issue. I get to tell you about your fatness because it's a public health issue. It's costing everybody money. Now that we see this trend and it going down, and that turns into, hey, if you cause this with the food supply and this and this and this, you need to help fix it. There's room for these creators of the medications to make their bag and for public health to contribute so we can all improve that and improve the economy and the ROI will match out. That's what I'm doing for work right now. So I'm all into the ROI for the medical side of things.
That's cool. I love that. Kat, I wanted you to ask about.
This is a big daddy question. I have a whole
lot.
It
is, yeah.
I just
threw it at you and I was like,
it's a big daddy. It's a big daddy.
But it's important and it aligns to the science behind all of these things.
We're going to break it all down. In fact, here, break it all down. Can you break down what insulin resistance is? Why does it make us so freaking hungry? And then how does insulin resistance get us to pre-diabetes, eventually type 2? And on average, do you want me to stop here and then
ask them all.
Okay.
Ask them all.
And then on average,
she knows that's coming.
I know. Right. But you know, how many people with obesity have insulin resistance that we know of? Because insulin resistance is kind of wonky to measure. And in short, is the only reason someone loses weight when taking a GLP-1 medication because they eat less? We know that answer, but you know. Oh, if you could break down how GLP-1 works, because I love when you explain that too.
Okay. I'm going to try to answer all this. If I forget something, you let me know. And I thought about this a little bit before because I knew we were going to talk about insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is one of the hardest things to explain to people. And there's many different ways to explain it. So today I'm going to do a little bit of a different angle to explain it. First of all, no, it's not just eating less the reason that a GLP-1 helps you lose weight. This is the simple answer I want to say there. If that was the case, something like phentermine, which is Adipex, something we've had a really long time, then everyone would be thin, right? Because appetite would be down. People don't eat for a period. We know we didn't see rates of everything go down. Okay. So no to that. As far as answering real quick first, how many people have insulin resistance? Insulin resistance can be a quite broad term. And so if you narrow it down to, okay, well, who has pre-diabetes, who has diabetes, things like that, it's been estimated that about 1 out of every 3 US adults have pre-diabetes. That's a huge number, right? When you think about our population, so about 1 out of 3. But again, there's lots of ways to define insulin resistance. And so one of the things I would say for that would be, so I think either physical signs on the body, like you can have something called acanthosis nigricans. So if you have a high insulin level, you can have this sort of brown velvety patching around the neck, under the armpits, even in the groin area. And you can also look for, sometimes there's lots of skin tags. So we think about this as friction with skin on skin, but it's also insulin resistance. It's up, right? So I mean, I'm sure I can probably find one here, under the arms again. So you might see like,
can I peep in?
Yeah.
Would skin tags also be polyps as well? I'm very polypy and skin taggy.
Polyps, I think more colon, and that's more sort of, I think, precancerous and different things. I think
my uterus and yeah, okay, great.
Yeah. But good question though. No, this is good because it's like the words we think, oh, it's just a growth.
Right.
But I think about skin tags as, again, there are other conditions as well where you can suddenly have a big eruption. I don't want to go down that lane, but if you have a lot of skin tags and there's these coloration and stuff like that. Yeah. And then there's also just getting lab work checked, right? So like a 3-month hemoglobin A1C, is it 5.7 to 6.4? It's a percent. 6.5 and above is diabetes. So again, there's different, and there's also different other labs and things.
So can I ask right here, is the HOMA IR test accurate?
So this depends who you're asking, right? So a lot more like functional medicine doctors will use that. So one of the things that I'll say is that some doctors are in the camp of we check fasting insulin levels, some are not, some are using these ratios, some are not. My thing is often it's not changing our management. And so I'm not personally someone that's using all these ratios and doing all these things, but I'll tell you, it's very classic. When you look at labs, the first thing that's going to get sort of screwed up, if you would, is going to be triglycerides. And then after that, you're going to see blood sugar come. And then after that, you're going to see diabetes. So it's a pretty consistent trajectory. They're trying to characterize things before the wheels have come off the wagon, right? So some doctors might use it all the time. I personally find it doesn't change things. It adds to the amount that someone has to pay for labs. And so I'm not using it that much. It's not really highly accepted within the like academic community, if you would, but I'm not saying it's not useful.
So basically, like you're saying, it doesn't change how we're going to treat you.
For me, it does not, right? So most patients, about 93% are going to have insulin resistance if their weight is up. There's a very small percent where the insulin's not up. They don't have those metabolic consequences. So if we're dealing with 93% of people, most people are going to benefit from the things that we're talking about, right? So it just kind of, it doesn't change what I'm going to do with people on the regular. But real quick with insulin resistance. So insulin is made by our pancreas, the beta cells. So it needs to produce enough insulin to handle the carbohydrates that you eat. So you start to develop insulin resistance when you are eating the whatever amount of carbohydrates and you can't make enough insulin to bring it down, and the blood sugars start to go up. And so what ends up happening is there's multiple ways to quote unquote burn this out. So one of it is like the autoimmune version that we think about, type 1 diabetes, right? The other version is that those cells become resistant, like they can't answer the message enough. And one of the ways that this happens, I want to take this track so that everyone can understand. I always explain it in an easy way, like knock, 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 someone's knocking on the door and you can't answer it, right? You're like, you have the sugar coming in, but there's not enough insulin around, like you need more and more and more insulin. But one of the things that happens that makes those cells sick, if you would be, it's when your body composition changes, when you put on additional weight, some of that is going to turn into visceral fat. So meaning inside the abdominal cavity around those organs. So this is subcutaneous, what you can see. Visceral is inside the actual abdominal cavity. That is what we call sick fat. Means it actually causes metabolic problems. It makes those beta cells not be as responsive. So for example, when people are going through perimenopause, if there's hypothyroid problems, low testosterone, things like that, all of that can change the beta cell functioning. So the same amount of sugar that's coming in, you can't handle it anymore. So you go down the pre-diabetes and then the diabetes route. That was a different way than I normally explain it, but does that kind of make sense?
That was great.
Want the fastest working GLP-1? For half the price, Ro now offers FDA-approved weight loss injections cheaper, with results you can see faster. Lose 15% of your weight with the formula from Eli Lilly that hits not one, but 2 hormones to curb hunger and nausea. Weight loss faster, confidence higher, price cheaper. See if you qualify at ro.co/TV.
Go ahead.
Okay. No, I was just seeing I was just looking to see if I answered everything. So what ends up happening is you're in this cycle, right? Where it's like you're trying to do these things to help yourself, but let's say someone that does not have a weight challenge, they're needing, we could make up numbers. They're needing a few units of insulin to bring down, let's say 30 grams worth of carb, right? They're needing, let's say 5 units, right? And then over here, if you have a little bit of additional weight and you're insulin resistant, you might need 100 units compared to 5. So at some point, the body's like, I can't keep up with this marathon anymore. I'm trying so hard every day to give you this extra insulin, but the body views it in a normal capacity. It's resistant, right? So there's all this extra insulin, but it's not as effective as it is in a counterpart that doesn't have the same metabolic challenges.
And is that where you're going to start seeing your A1C going up?
Exactly. So that's what happens is it's like you have a ton of insulin around, but nothing's getting answered, right? So it's like you start to see the blood sugar go up. You can't bring it down anymore. So that's why, like, if someone has pre-diabetes or diabetes, we start to look at, can we eat less carbs, or can we balance them, or can we do exercise, or can we use a medication? Can we work on your sleep? Can we work on your stress? All the different ways, anything that would affect that carbohydrate load on the body and how you're handling it, we look for any single way in the pathway to kind of break that.
Real quick, because I know it's going to come up. Are carbohydrates something you need to avoid on these medications, or if you have obesity?
Good
No,
question.
no. So this is not like we cut out food groups. In fact, I think balance all the way. What I will say is this, is that we do know that very ultra processed food, meaning there's ingredients in there you can't pronounce. You would never be able to make it at home, right? Stuff like that. I'm not saying, I'm not like a, never with those foods. I mean, my Lord, they're in my house. But the main thing is those foods our body was not made to handle those in the best capacity, right? So I would say as much as we can, whole-based foods, right? So like an apple is very low glycemic index, meaning how much it jacks up our sugar compared to applesauce, right? So it's just more processed, right?
Gotcha.
Maybe that's not the best example, but like eating candy, very different than if you would have that same amount of carbohydrate in another capacity. If you had some protein and fiber first, then the carbs, you don't get the same blood sugar spike, so insulin doesn't go up as much. So then we start to manage. It's not cured, but we manage the insulin resistance. So that's part of it.
I love that. That's super helpful. So in terms of when people diet, right? When they restrict, or when we're all restricting in a certain way, right? When they restrict, what's happening when they do lose weight in terms of like aiding the insulin resistance? Is anything changing? Because like I'm wondering, a lot of us, and it's a very common theme, right, in our thing, is that I feel like 30 pounds is the number, like between 30 and 50 pounds. People like, I've lost it, I kept it up, and then I regained it and then some. Like it's a constant theme in our guest. So what's happening? And does that have anything to do?
That's a great question.
So typically, I think in percentage body weight loss and not pounds, because again, it's relative to everyone, right? Usually the 30 pounds, most people, I'm going to take a traditional like 200 something pound person, that tends to be a 10% weight loss. So without medication, when we're just doing lifestyle, most people can achieve about a 10%. Now, can they keep it off? Probably not. Like we know that from data. But it's what ends up kicking in usually after that is a lot of what we call metabolic adaptation. So the hunger hormones start to go up, saying, hey, like you're hungry, eat more. So you're like, I'm not eating, like I'm eating as much as I need. I feel I'm hungry if I don't eat more, right? It's like your body is kicking that aspect up. And then it's also got more efficient because you lose weight. So like the skeletal muscle, like everything is needing less to work. So you have this wicked little combination where usually if you weren't being super strategic about it, your metabolism is down some, plus now the hunger hormones are kicking up. And then of course there's other factors at play. So then your body is always trying to fight to get you back to the starting place, if not even higher at that point.
Okay.
Because you probably lost some
how
muscle.
is your body fighting? In that just it's telling your brain to eat more? Or
Yeah. So for example,
or is it
like
metabolizing differently?
So all of it. So for example, I like to give the most concrete example is the hunger hormone ghrelin, that those levels go up. So you are legitimately more hungry. So what are things that increase ghrelin, right? Lack of sleep. It's going to shoot us in the foot. When we lose weight, right? If we haven't eaten for a long period of time. So that weight loss on its own is upping that level. That's why people that get bariatric surgery, initially they're so helped because it's decreased about 90%. So they walk out of surgery, if they get a sleeve, instantly being less hungry. Yes, there's the physical restriction, right? That you cut out a big part of the stomach and, it's smaller now, things like that. But it's also the fact that you got rid of a lot of that ghrelin production initially. Now, I'm not talking long-term what ends up happening, but initially that's why people end up feeling better. So it's all of those things. And then most people can't lose weight without losing muscle. So they end up in a spot where like metabolism's lower, ghrelin is up, and all these things contribute. I'm just giving two like really concrete examples, but all of that contributes to just a really, really strong drive. I describe it like a hurricane, right? It's always like a hurricane is going. It's not fun to go out in hurricane winds, right? We don't want to do it, but we're then expecting to keep going down. And typically people can't do that without a medication assist.
Yeah. So back to that, because that kind of is our next question. So we have this weird ass cycle that most of us have gone through a long time, if not our whole lives, right? And now we have GLP-1s, like Jenny was talking about, right? And you kind of put that in there and it does something to the cycle, right?
Yeah.
So what is it doing in terms of not just the hunger, right, but the insulin resistance? Like, how is it treating that, right? So that we can, I don't know, process it efficiently or whatever it is, you know?
Yeah. So it's hitting multiple different places in our body, right? So it's not just that physically we feel like we've had enough food, right? Because otherwise what we were trying to do before is kind of hack the system with all these diet culture diets are like, what's the biggest amount of the lowest calorie food? Partly what they were hooking on is the stretch receptors need to get activated. Okay, so we have that aspect. We have that we're going to the brain, the hypothalamus, that you're getting the satiety signal like you're okay. We're helping sensitize to insulin. So we're helping multiple things in the body. So this is why people can lose weight and be able to keep maintaining that. That's why I do think you're right when you were speaking about the physician that was talking about how we sort of naturally reach a new weight where we're okay. There's always more that you can do, but can you do it is the question. Like, will your hunger level accommodate it? Will your lifestyle accommodate it? Where sometimes it's like, do you really have the time for 2+ hours of exercise a day? Right? Like there just gets to be this point where it's very challenging because we're hitting all the different things that we know at this moment. We know there's triple agonists coming up, right? So right now we're hitting two main things. Then, we have Contrave and other things that are hitting other parts of the brain. So some people are on multiple medications, right? This is something that I recently had to face with myself. Do I go on something else? I'll talk about it on the podcast coming up, but it's like, do you or not, right? And so that, yes, it's helping with multiple aspects. And that's why people are getting so much help that they're getting. It's not just that they're eating less.
Love it. I love that. That's so helpful. I think that understanding again, like that this helps in a lot of different areas. Now, I'm going to ask a question that I feel like if anybody is a naysayer they're listening to and their next thing is going to be, but what about the food? Isn't the food that's the food's causing all this, right? It's all the food. And like, that was something I thought was interesting on that News Nation interview is that, we had, and the guy was
Dan Abrams.
Was it Dan Abrams?
Okay, Dan Abrams.
Like, I'm so mad about that. But he was like, hey, can it be both things? Can it be the food is the problem and also the sick people need the medicine? And like nobody would say a word, right? Because everybody wanted to be in their respective corners, but isn't it?
You know
who's eating that food also is people who don't have weight problems. Hang out with athletes or anyone who doesn't have a weight problem. They eat that stuff too.
Yes. Yeah. And as the designated fat friend, all those people that pretend like they're all these things, they call me and we go get guacamole. So I don't want to hear it. And cheese. Yeah. They just don't want anybody to see them doing it. I'm the girl they deal with. Right.
Right. Like because we're seen as because we're seen as doing something wrong, people want us to suffer in ways that they don't suffer.
Yes.
The reality is like I've really evolved over time, and like any doctor or person that you follow actually should be evolving over time. Like if they're saying the same party line that they did 10 years ago, red flag. Okay. Right. So if you look back, like this podcast is down because me and my business partner, we stopped working together. But I used to be all like, we just need unprocessed food. And like, if you can just do all that, you're going to be great. And the reality is a small percent that could work. But I know for me, like I tried that perfectly for months and months and I couldn't get past the 10%. So I'd be like, oh, I'm that same person. The data is correct. These things don't work long time if the challenge is high enough. So it's all of it and then some. Yeah. So maybe it does work for people only whole-based things and only from scratch and only this and that if their metabolic disease is not all the way past a point, right? Can they stick to it? It's so complex. And I wish that was only the answer because I do think people have tried everything, me included. I'm the biggest putter of shame on myself in the beginning. Yeah. And I think it would have worked at this point if that was the only answer, that you just eat whole-based things and, we don't have anything processed. The reality is people still struggle that are eating 100% unprocessed.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So true. So
you can spend your whole paycheck at whole, where.
Listen, if they want to be a sponsor, Whole Foods.
I get a delivery every week. I love it. But it didn't solve the problem.
Okay.
Well, it was speaking of, like, say, GLP-1s and how they work. I just want to go a little bit deeper. What does inflammation, because, we talk about obesity being a chronic inflammatory disease. What does inflammation do to your body? How bad is it? And how do GLP-1s help with that inflammation?
Yeah. So I want you to think about when I think about inflammation, my mind always goes, 'cause I feel it's the most like concrete thing. I think about rheumatologic conditions where inflammatory markers are through the roof. So I think about like rheumatoid arthritis seems to be one that most people, you know, someone in
Mhm.
your lifetime that has like the joint again, like the joint disfigurement that can occur. And the thing I want you to know about RA, and I bring this up as an example because people are gonna be like, oh yeah, totally, I'm on board, I get it. But if with weight, people fight, right? With RA, it's not just the joints. It's the heart can get affected, the lung can get affected.
Okay.
There's no system that doesn't get affected. They have the atlantoaxial joint in the top of the neck, the C1 and 2, cervical 1 and 2, that can get off. They can have an instability and they have problems with getting intubated. Okay, so you can see how important this is. Like they need to know that you have RA. They need to know, have they had that x-ray? Have you had this
Yeah.
happen before? Scary land. So that is all inflammation. It is incredibly damaging to the body. And I want you to imagine when that's occurring. Again, I don't know why I like to think of storms in our body, but I think there's something called cytokine storm. Like they're like the inflammatory markers are up. It causes a problem with everything. It can make you more hungry than normal. It can maybe make you depressed. It can make your joints, your arthritis get worse sooner. Everything in your body is affected by this. It's multi-system. So everything is talking to everything. So let's say, okay, you had something happening over here and this, no organ system exists on its own. The heart relies on the lungs to, you know,
Right.
everything is pumping through and going through another system. That's why you usually, it's like cardiopulmonary disease, right? You're not getting one without the other. So inflammation in general, it's affecting all the systems in our bodies from not working properly. And the answer is not just, I feel like the most recent like phase online has been like, bring your cortisol down. Here are these like, you know, not gonna say any names, like here's this powder, take this, you're gonna be good. And I'm like, it's a no. It's a no. If you feel great with that, amazing, but that's not the only answer. So again, we're fighting some of that cycle that we can't break. We're
Yeah.
fighting some of that with the GLP-1. So that, and I don't even think we know all the ways, to be honest, because I feel like every single day a new study comes out. But
True.
that's why I like to, like, this whole system is broken. It's sort of, has anyone here watched Inside Out 2, Anxiety? Okay, I'm going to
Not
give away
yet.
something.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert. If you're watching this and you haven't watched, pause. Okay, I'm going to give something away. You know, at the end, when she's just like, she's going and they can't stop her, right? Like she's like lost it and they can't break her, right? Like they can't take her out of it. They can't, that's inflammation in our body. A GLP-1 is that like compassionate moment where they're all like hugging and it all changes and it's all different at the end and we all cried. Maybe I'm the only one.
Mhm.
That's the GLP-1. That's one tool right now. I hope in the future we have many more, but that's, it's helping to break that inflammation where it just goes round and round.
Speaking of compassionate, I want you to go over it again. Can you go over your compassionate pause?
Let's do it. Let's do it. So I want to add something else that's funny. Talk about changing with time, because it was over a year ago when we first like, you
Yeah.
know, we're talking and stuff. So I talk about something with food when we're not hungry. So remember, if we're hungry, means it can be solved by a food you don't have high desire for, a hard-boiled egg, a piece of chicken, you know, it's like whatever. You eat, you always eat when you're hungry. But sometimes we're not hungry, but we still want the thing. Even if we have great help on board, it's
Yeah.
it's part of the chronic condition of overweight or obesity. And so part of it, the compassion pause is something that you can use where you just literally pattern interrupt. You pause for a second. Maybe you physically get yourself out of the kitchen or that favorite chair where you eat, you know, you physically get yourself out and you just
Yeah.
literally pause for a second and you're like, am I hungry? Right. And if you're like, yes, you go eat. If no, then you pause for a second. You're like, what do I actually need right now? What do I need? And you might not know how to answer it for yourself. You might be like, I need a break, but you're at work. Maybe you're literally standing in the operating room. You're attacked. You can't stop at that moment, but you know, in the future, I'm going to need some rest. In the future, I'm going to have to plan this out differently. What do I need right now? For me, a really big thing after work, I need like a 5-minute no one talk. I sit on my bed, no one talk. I have to actively tell myself, we're going from work mode now to family mode. Now you put that away. You will deal with everything tomorrow, but now you focus on your family. So getting in touch with what your needs are, very, very important, because most of us, we never got that answered. We were always, you know, food was denied, this was denied, that was denied. Food is but a tool ultimately, often. It's not the whole answer, right? It's a way that we've learned to cope. There's nothing wrong with that. Even if you never change that behavior, there's nothing wrong with you. It is but one tool. The one caveat I want to give, so you pause, you ask yourself what you need. The third part is you have permission, the permission slip. If you need to go eat it, go eat it. The exercise here is not that we have to withhold everything, that we're a bad person. It's simply that we start to disassociate the food with being the answer for times of not physical hunger, because food actually can't solve it. And that's one of the ways that we can break ourselves out of it, to start to get to know what that is. Again, you do not instantly need to solve for it, but it starts to get really loud. It turns from the whisper into like a siren. You're like, oh my gosh, when I don't get enough rest. I mean, for me, it's the times when I want to do a ton of emotional eating, because I love how you guys talked about, like, of course I overeat at times. Like, of course. I mean, my gosh, it's definitely part of what I struggle with. It's always when I'm overworking. It's when I'm doing too many things. I'll schedule in the lunch. I'll do here. I'll do there. Kim, I had to cancel a podcast at one point. I was like, I can't anymore. Like, I just can't. I was like, and she was so understanding, and I appreciated that so much. So that's one way of doing it. The thing I want to tell you, though, the thing I've evolved since then, I'm going to teach this more later today in a workshop in my clinic. Your stress needs to be regulated enough to do this. So if you think about a stress scale, 0 to 10, if you are 7 to 10, likely you're like about to scream at someone, you're about to yell, you're about to lose your SHIT proverbially. That's not a time when you're like, compassionate, pause, what do I need? You need a distraction. You need a distraction at that level. You can access this usually when you're about a 4 to a 6. That's when you're kind of mid-level regulated. When you're lower than that, you don't need a tool like this. You're not overeating. There's not a problem happening. So what I want you to know is, if you're super about to pop off, use distraction. Again, talk to your medical team. But this is typically what I've seen, is that distraction is when we're really not regulated. When we are regulated, we can pause that moment. But I don't want you to use this against yourself. I don't want you to use this tool and then you're like, and it never works for me. I remember the first time I started to talk on social media about this, someone said, I can't access it. I can't do it. And I didn't know enough at the time to say, how's your regulation at that moment? But again, this is part of sort of evolving over time and adding things.
Yeah. I think the mental piece has been a big deal for me. And I think Jeannie probably can attest to it as well. Like, I don't know, like the ability to stop and think. Like, I really didn't have that before. Like, I really didn't, like, I know, I'm sorry, I'm getting upset, but like, I really couldn't. And people would say to me all the time, just this, just do this, and none of those just were possible for me, because I couldn't stop. Like, I couldn't slow down. My brain was always on, bam, 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 bam. You know, and
and then you're physically sick. You're hurt from eating so much food, and you still can't stop.
No, I know. There's no off point. Is the problem, right? So we were just talking with the GLP-1s, like, one of the things is, I forgot to mention this, when your insulin levels are up so much, you're just incredibly hungry. Yeah. And it's so sick in a way, because we think, oh, well, we'd be satisfied that this insulin up is answering things. It's the resistance part that's killing us, right? Yeah. So there's no off signal. We always want something, and then we judge ourselves. Yeah, for sure. One last thing I wanted to say, though, Kim, because this is something else I'm seeing these patterns start to emerge online, right? Like, our community is growing over time, and I love this, like what's being talked about. Right. So I see this comment, I just want the food noise to end. I never again want to experience it. That day's not coming. So we can manage it more. We can get tools. I think it's getting better and better what we can offer, but we still need these other type of tools, whether it be that we walk for stress management, or we talk to someone, or I think like communities like this are incredibly powerful for people to see that they're not alone. I think it's honestly like everybody in this needs someone, whether it be a friend, a group like this, a community. But a day is not coming where you're not going to be presented with that same wanting those same things, because it worked. It worked in the past. Of course, you're going to want to go back to that. So the answer is like, how can I distance myself more of like, it's there. I don't need to answer it. I hear you. I see you. It doesn't mean I'm going to gain the weight back. It doesn't mean I'm wrong. Like, there's so much work here. So don't beat yourself up if you're not happy with where you're at, or that you hear this stuff. Like, it's part of it. And it might even be cyclical throughout the week, because the meds might wear off before you retake it again. Right. So it's complex, and just have some compassion for yourself. It's really hard.
Right. That was one of the best lessons I learned, is like, nothing bad happens when you're wrong. Nothing bad happens when you make a mistake. And we've been like, again, back to the shame we've all had our whole lives. Like, I think we're particularly sensitive to being wrong and to making errors. And like, you can't move forward without your errors. They are needed. Yeah. So that was one of my biggest lessons in all of it, is to to make a lot of mistakes. It's okay.
Yeah, it's okay, especially on this journey, because like, you really kind of are. I think many of us would. I think anybody can attest. You're evolving into a newer you. Like it's not a different you, it's a newer you. It's like a healthier you, hopefully, if you're doing the work. I think that there's and when I say doing the work, like I think this is even more of a mental journey than it is a physical, especially if you've lived your life in a big body for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot.
There's a lot. I know. Well, this has been a lovely conversation. I think we're at time. It's been fantastic. Thank you so much for coming and helping us learn more about our disease so we can advocate for our health. And Jeannie, thank you so much for being vulnerable.
You're welcome.
Oh my God. Yes, thank you so much.
It's very important. Like people will hear these things, and when they can go, that sounds like me. I think I'm going to go talk to my doctor. Like that's life-changing. And that's what we see here. And so thank you for being a part of it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on. It's always great.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we will say goodbye and I'll stop the recording and we will see you guys next week. Hasta la pasta. Be kind to yourselves.
20 seconds a week to lose 20% of your weight in a year with diet and exercise. That's the power of GLP-1s through Ro. Ro helps find the medication that's right for you, based on cost, availability, and your weight loss goals. Losing weight with GLP-1s is possible through Ro.
Are you interested in understanding GLP-1 medications like Ozempic, Wegovy, or Mounjaro? Then join us on The Plus Sides, Cracking the Obesity Code, the groundbreaking podcast helping people change their lives one episode at a time. The Plus Sides podcast is a disruptor. We're breaking down barriers, smashing stereotypes, and sharing inspiring stories that'll leave you feeling informed and empowered. Join us every week to learn from doctors who are specialists around GLP-1 medications like Ozempic, Wegovy, and Mounjaro. They'll provide you with science and facts to validate these incredible stories. But that's not all. We'll also bring you the voices of the GLP-1 Mounjaro TikTok community, real people who face the challenges of obesity-related diseases and disorders and discovered the incredible plus sides of GLP-1 medications. Our episodes are filled with heartwarming stories, laughter, and moments of triumph. You'll connect with our amazing community members who are reclaiming their health and experiencing their fullest lives. Are you ready to embark on a journey of discovery and empowerment? Tune in to The Plus Sides, Cracking the Obesity Code, and together we'll change the narrative around obesity and end the stigma. Subscribe now on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform and join our incredible community. Let's celebrate the plus sides of life together because every story deserves to be heard. Every life deserves to shine, and everyone deserves access to expert knowledge and medication. The Plus Sides Podcast. You're not alone. It's not your fault.